For as long as societies have existed, humans have been building amazing monuments and landmarks that are dedicated to, well, monument. We don't think much about these landmarks because they've been around for a long time. However, not every monument was destined to appear as it does today. From a Gothic version of the Taj Mahal to a Mount Rushmore with a woman's face on it, alternative plans have been pitched for almost every structure you can think of. It even has some really weird White House drawings. Not sure about this? Get ready to see some of the bravest, coolest, and craziest possible outcomes for well-known landmarks around the world. Number 1. The World's Fair is an important part of building history. Upbeat music and innovative design. When towns host events, they usually end up building huge, impressive structures that change the look of the city. The World Fair is responsible for landmarks like the Seattle Space Needle, Brussels Atomium, and Paris' huge Guillotine. Oh, I meant the Eiffel Tower. Despite the fact that it almost looked like a giant version of that enormous machine for removing heads, the French wanted to commemorate the event with a new landmark when Paris was chosen to host the World Fair in 1889. However, 700 other designs were submitted for review before Gustav Eiffel's tower design was chosen. One of them was a giant lighthouse made of solid granite that stood nearly 1,000 feet tall. The person who designed it said that it would have lights that were so bright that almost everyone in Paris could read a newspaper at night. Imagine trying to sleep next to that. But the real showstopper was this pitch for a massive guillotine in the center of Paris. The guillotine would commemorate the French Revolution, when one of these dangerous machines was used to kill the royal family and many members of the ruling class. If the Statue of Liberty ever erred on the wrong side of the French people, this guillotine would have been big enough to make her sweat. Number 2. A Capitol Chicken. This building is very important to American government in many ways. Congress has met there for more than 120 years. Laws for the whole country are written there, and presidents are sworn in. But despite everything, it almost ended up looking like a fast food fried chicken place. In 1792, Thomas Jefferson proposed holding an architectural competition to choose the design for the Capitol building, which had not yet been built. As an architect, Jefferson thought he could pick a design that would please George Washington, the first president of the United States. But there was one entry that really didn't inspire him. It was from James Diamond, an amateur architect. The building itself isn't bad, but it featured a bad top. The weather vane in this sketch is meant to represent it. Actually, it's meant to look like a bald eagle, not a chicken. When Washington and others were trying to decide what bird would be America's national bird, they didn't like the giant bird that looked like a derpy. Instead, they chose William Thornton's design, which they thought showed greatness and beauty. It could have been even worse than Diamond's design, no matter how silly it is. Number 3. Triumph's Elephant. Now let's go back to classy Paris. The Arc de Triomphe was commissioned by Napoleon in 1806 to commemorate and celebrate France's numerous military wins, so don't worry, they weren't suggesting anything crazy like building a giant electric chair in place of the Louvre. Technically, Napoleon's numerous war triumphs, a much stranger design, Elephant Triumphal, was pitched in its place 45 years earlier. It was finished in 1836 and now stands as a testament to the enduring spirit of the French people, along with Napoleon's ego. While the elephant would have only stood 33 feet tall, 130 feet shorter than the arch, it would have featured some extravagant interior decor and even a garden. This absolutely insane elephant monument would have featured a spiral staircase leading into the animal's belly, along with a complex drainage system so that water would be constantly spewing from its trunk. Too bad the French government didn't like the design. It's possible that Napoleon was inspired by the unfinished design when he commissioned the Elephant de Bastille monument, which was sadly never finished. This would have been only 15 minutes away from Moulin Rouge Park, which once had a giant elephant statue. I hear you asking, why was Paris so obsessed with elephants? Well, the French were just crazy about them in the late Renaissance because they thought they were smart and strong. Having said that, it's pretty amazing to think that Paris's skyline could have been very different from what it is today. Giant elephants and huge guillotines sounds more like a fever dream than a skyline. Number 4. The whole Mount Rushmore. The side of Mount Rushmore is dedicated to some of America's most important presidents. The monument took 14 long years to finish, with each face being cut out of the mountain by hand and reaching a staggering height of 60 feet. However, technically, it is only halfway finished. The project began in 1927. and a man named Gutzon Borglum was in charge of it. Borglum was obsessed with the idea of a monument to the great men of American history. At first, he wanted to include the president's bodies in the rock face as well, just in case anyone thought they might be shirtless below the neck. Borglum also wanted to include the whole history of America, but Congress eventually cut back on the project because they thought Borglum was going too far. However, after the building started, it was suggested that Susan B. Anthony, a significant abolitionist and women's rights advocate, be included in the monument. This idea was so well-liked that a congressional bill was written to include Susan, and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt even wrote to Borglum herself to praise the idea. Why then is Susan not up on the mountain today? Borglum, on the other hand, was a huge racist who fought vehemently against the idea of any women being featured on his very masculine mountain. The monument had already taken 14 years to carve out, and adding Susan would have increased the time building ended to 17.5 years. Adding up all the bodies might have made that number twice as high. What do you think? Should old Susan have been carved on that mountain? If they wanted to include the full history of America, well, they might still be working on it today. Who would you pick to be carved into Mount Rushmore if you had the opportunity? Elvis Star. What about Michael Jordan? Who is Hulk Hogan? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more great videos. Number 5. What do we have next? India's Taj Mahal is one of the most famous and loved buildings in the world. What is the Black Taj? But its clean marble actually hides a dark secret. When his beloved wife Mumtaz Mahal died in 1631, Shah Jahan, the Mughal Emperor of India, was so heartbroken that he commissioned his greatest project yet, her mausoleum. Jahan was a great lover of grand architecture and is responsible for some amazing structures, such as the Wazir Khan and likely Aladdin-inspiring Jama Masjid. The Taj Mahal was constructed to be perfectly symmetrical, down to the last detail, over the course of 22 years. It is a marvel of engineering. Because it's so even, many scholars think the Taj Mahal isn't finished, because there is just one. Jahan started building a second Taj Mahal across the river from the first one sometime between 1640 and 1655. This Mahal would have been exactly the same as the first one, with one exception. It would have been made of pitch black stone instead of white marble. This would have continued the beautiful balance started by the first one, and Jahan plans to be buried next to his wife in the dark Taj. Unfortunately, the project was almost completely forgotten after Jahan's passing because his children were too busy fighting over the emperor's estate.